Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mobolaji Sani, and I head the telecoms, media, and technology sector for Stanbic IBTC. It is my pleasure to welcome you all back to the final session of our 3-day investor webinar series. This session will be focused on the Nigerian tech sector, and I'm confident that you will find it informative and insightful. Our distinguished panelist this afternoon is a lady of many talents and achievements, Juliet Ehimuan. Juliet is the director leading Google's business strategy in West Africa. She was named by Forbes as one of the top 20 power women in Africa, by the London Business School as one of the 30 people changing the world, and featured in the BBC Africa Power Women series and on CNN Innovate Africa. With over 25 years experience, primarily in technology, oil and gas, and new media industries across Europe, Middle East, and Africa, Juliet is a thought leader and a leading voice on innovation, transformation, and leadership. She has received numerous awards for her astounding contribution to the digital landscape in Africa. Under her leadership, the Google team has made a significant impact on local content development, infrastructure deployment, and digital capacity. Recent Google investments in Africa include commitment to provide free digital skill training to over 10 million youths in Africa, a scholarship program for current and aspiring developers, support for technological setups in Africa through a Launchpad Accelerator program, and a Google Impact Challenge, providing over $20 million in funding to nonprofits to advance the cause of education and economic prosperity in Africa. She holds an executive MBA from the London Business School, a postgraduate degree in computer science from the University of Cambridge, and a bachelor's degree in computer engineering from the Obafemi Awolowo University. She is a recipient of the London School Global Women's Scholarship, and at Cambridge University was awarded the Sloan College Scholarship and the Malaysian Commonwealth Scholar. She is a fellow of the Cambridge Commonwealth Society. She was also awarded the IT Personality of the Year in 2012 by the Nigerian Computer Society, Digital Personality of the Year 2016 by the Marketing World, and received a 2015 Titans of Technology Award from Technology Africa. Through her Beyond Limits Africa initiative, Juliet is building leadership and organization capacity in youths, professionals, and executives across different industries. She's also an author and has most recently published 30 Days of Excellence, a leadership and personal effectiveness guide. Welcome, Juliet. It's a pleasure to have you on this session. And you know, when I was reading you all the achievements and accomplishments, I was really inspired. And for me, what really struck out was, you know, it almost appeared that from a young age, you were quite focused and clear of what your path was going to be, just speaking to the technology sector. So maybe you can share with us and the audience, you know, why, you know, what brought about the passion for technology. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Balaji, and hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I would say that when I was looking at what field to go into, I had an aptitude for the sciences. And at that time, it was either engineering or medicine. And I didn't feel like I had the stomach for medicine. And so it was engineering was a default choice. And computing was a new field at the time. So just bringing both together sounded really exciting. And that's why I studied computer engineering. And my interest in the field has been sustained because this is an industry that changes on a very regular basis. There's never a dull moment, no 2 years are the same. And also, I'm very inspired by the impact that technology has on just empowering people, growing businesses, and just really driving economic growth and transformation. So, for these reasons, I've just remained interested in the field.
Thank you, Juliet, for that. That was quite insightful. Just going quickly as we proceed to the Q&A sessions. I'm aware that a couple of Google's Nigerian focus over the past couple of years has been around, making internet more accessible and affordable. Also looking into local content development and also building local capacity. So maybe you can share with us, just in terms of the milestones and what, Google's achievement in West Africa and specific to Nigeria has been over the past couple of years. And maybe you can also speak, briefly to your 3 to 5 years strategic priorities for Nigeria. Thank you.
Awesome. So we've taken a long-term strategic view of our business in Nigeria. We do see a lot of opportunity in this space, and we think that there are lots of benefits to be gained by stimulating the digital economy. And so we've really been focused on looking at ways to collaborate with different stakeholders in public sector and in the private sector to raise the level of digital awareness and participation. Our strategy has been focused on 3 pillars. The first, as you rightly mentioned, is around access, which is how can we make the internet more affordable and available to the average user? And in this space, we've done a number of things, including just looking at innovative technologies, like looking at using TV white spaces spectrum, and working with players in the telecoms industry. As well as in government. We've been part of broadband committees and just industry think tanks to look at how to accelerate broadband growth. We've also invested in some projects. We had a project around providing Wi-Fi in public locations through a technology called Google Station, which we deployed in partnership with internet service providers. We've also been looking at bringing down the costs of devices as well. So partnering with OEMs to see how we can ensure that smart devices are a lot more available and affordable. So these are some examples of the things we've been doing in the access space. The second bucket, the second strategic area is around, like you rightly said, local content development. We believe that the internet has a lot to offer, but it's a lot more relevant when you have local content. And so we have been working with businesses, for example, to see how to really create an active online presence. We've worked with even the creative industry to look at digitizing creative content on platforms like YouTube. A lot of people would confirm the fact that at the moment there's a lot of creative content from Nigeria and across Africa on YouTube, from Nollywood movies to African music to lifestyle content and other forms of entertainment. And this is an area that I'm quite passionate about because I think it's a great way to export Nigerian culture and African culture. And also, in many cases, these content channels are monetized, and so you're also attracting, foreign investment from outside in. So it's a good contribution to economic growth. The third bucket is really around capacity building, and we've done a number of things and are still investing heavily in this area. One of the areas we've thought about is just providing free digital skills training at scale. We pledged to train 10 million people for free with digital skills. And we've done over 50% of that, and that's ongoing. And obviously, in the wake of the pandemic and just looking at the realities of today, we're pivoting that slightly to focus on supporting SMBs with economic recovery and also supporting educational institutions around adopting e-learning and educational software. As part of capacity building as well, we have a program that we run for startups. It's called our Google for Startups Accelerator Program. This is a 3-month in-depth mentoring and support program to early stage technology startups. And I'm so delighted that we've had some great success stories coming out of that program. Paystack that I think we all celebrated a few months ago was one of the first, was part of the first cohorts to participate in that program. Flutterwave as well was among the first cohort. And I've seen a lot of our graduates from that program really do well in terms of success in attracting investments and just growing their businesses. So that's something that we're really pleased about and just really proud about. And also, it's important to build capacity in the developer community. So as part of our education efforts, we're training 200,000 developers. And this is just really looking at building engaging apps, with cloud technologies for mobile, which is really the platform of choice for the majority of users in Africa. And we're administering that through an Africa Scholarships program. So these are some examples of different areas that we think collectively help to stimulate the digital ecosystem and that we're continuously investing in.
Well, absolutely. Thanks, Juliet. Thanks for that. I think just on the back of what you had mentioned, it's great to hear that, the team from Flutterwave and Paystack actually had, connectivity to Google. Yay. So that's fantastic to hear. Well, just on the back of that, my question is, when we look at capacity building and when we're able to build up the capacity for our youths, how do we retain those talents in country? Because we've seen quite a number of, youths, flight risk, leaving the country with the new skills that they've learned. How do we ensure that we retain those talents in country? Thank you.
That's a good question. And I think one of the great things we have in this environment is just the volume of very talented young people. 70% of our population is below the age of 35. And what we see with Nigerian youth and youths across Africa is a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, a huge drive, a lot of creativity, able to do a lot with very little, right? Just having access to basic tools. We've seen them do magic and create great things. I think it's a joint responsibility for leaders in business and governments to ensure that we're continuously creating opportunities for our young people. And the reality is the fact that there is a lot of opportunity in this environment. Nigeria is 200 million people. When you look across Africa, 1.2 billion people, there's a lot of opportunity to do great things on the continent and to actually go from local solutions, expanding out into global solutions, which is something that I'm very passionate about and something that we're looking forward to see a lot more of. So I think it's a collective responsibility. It's important to, create the enabling environment for young people, provide supportive communities. That's one of the reasons why I think tech hubs, for example, are a great resource because, it's really a gathering of like-minded people. They get access to resources, training, and can just really feed off one another. And we do support a number of tech hubs for that reason. So yeah, I think that's something that is a collective responsibility, and it's really important to provide that enabling environment to really support our young people to excel.
Absolutely. Thanks, Juliet, for that. Just moving on quickly, I think globally, we've seen a growing demand for digitization. What are some of the signs that you have seen that are indicative of the potential for growth in the Nigerian tech space?
Yes, so there is a huge potential for growth. The signs that are very evident in the sector, a number of things. One is the fact that we've seen that the sector has grown over the years, and we're just scratching the surface. There's still a lot of headroom. Nigeria's ICT sector has grown from less than 1% of GDP in 2001 to over 10% of GDP in 2019. That's a tremendous growth. And we've surpassed South Africa to emerge as a premier investment destination with about 55 active tech hubs, raising a total of almost 100 million in 2019. We're also Africa's largest technology market, and we account for 23% of internet users in Africa. The tech startup space is also one that is growing impressively, and we've seen disruptions in the fields of energy, agriculture, banking, transportation, logistics, health, education, and finance through technology startups creating solutions to problems in these sectors. I would say that the growth of the tech sector also offers new possibilities for Nigeria's growing labor force in terms of employment and entrepreneurship. Therefore, as the population grows, and when we think about the huge population of young people, I would say we would definitely see a lot more innovations from the tech sector. This is just the beginning. And those innovations will disrupt more traditional sectors by providing sustainable solutions to Nigeria's problems, especially in the areas of security and economic sustainability. I talked about Paystack earlier, and that's a recent big success from the shores of Nigeria. But we also have the likes of Kobo 360, Flutterwave, FarmCrowdy, Andela, LifeBank, 54Gin, that have raised massive foreign direct investments. And that's also an indication of the growth potential. So I think this is an exciting time for the digital space in Nigeria.
Thanks, Juliet. You're absolutely right. We've seen a lot of activities recently in the fintech space. I know that 2020 was a bit muted, but with the likes of Paystack, we've seen Kuda come up. We've talked about Flutterwave, so there's a lot of potential in that space, and we'll come to that in a bit. But still looking at the infrastructure space and still the deficits in that space. You had also mentioned that there's estimated 1.2 billion people on the African continent, and it's also estimated that over 800 million of those people do not have access to the internet. What can be done to address some of those digital infrastructure issues in Nigeria specifically?
I think access continues to be a challenge, and that is just availability of reliable broadband across the entire country, including a decent level of connectivity in the rural areas, and also affordability. The price of a good quality connectivity at the moment is still high and out of reach for the masses, I would say. Now, there are a number of issues that are that present challenges within the industry. One of them is right-of-way issues, and and this really impacts the cost of laying internet cables and expanding infrastructure. I would say that it's really important to have very deliberate intervention from relevant stakeholders, and I'm talking specifically the government, but also private sector players. Now, from the perspective of right-of-way, I would say that's contributing significantly to the challenges we're seeing around just delivering on the 2018 broadband plan. Some state and local governments demanded, right-of-way charges over and above what is officially stimulated, which is 145 naira per meter for fiber. But we're seeing charges from between 1,500 to 6,000 naira per meter, which is quite expensive. And as a result of that, it is reportedly 4 times cheaper to transmit fiber internet from Lagos to London than from Lagos to Abuja. And we can learn a lot from the rapid development of Nigeria's global system of mobile telecommunication, which I would say has been aided largely by foreign investments. To understand that removing barriers to foreign investment can greatly stimulate the development of fiber broadband infrastructure in Nigeria. I am aware, though, that in January 2020, just last year, a meeting with governors seemed to have reached a promising end towards achieving a uniform right-of-way payment system. However, by June, only 7 states had agreed to the 45 naira per meter system. And so this is something that just needs to be looked at, because the delay, with all this delay, we've lost a year out of the 5-year plan. And, there are lots of opportunities that we're leaving on the table if we're not advancing this. So that's just one classic example of what can be done. There are other challenges as well, like, multiple taxation, vandalization of telecoms assets and things like that. So it's really around removing these blockers and creating a more enabling environment for rapid infrastructure deployment, expansion.
Thanks, Juliet, for that. Also, like you, I was also reading it up, and I just noticed that, I think it was Kaduna State governor who had totally eliminated the charges on right-of-way, and a couple of other state governors have also said, you know what, we're going to go ahead with the 145 naira per linear meter for right-of-way. How do you think we can encourage other states, to come to the party? And what are some of those, I don't know if it's the word initiative, what are some of those things that, we can put on the table? How do we enlighten them to show them, the impact of ensuring that those cables are laid at the right price, ensuring that there's affordable internet for the growing masses in their various states?
I think that the government can provide incentives, and something can be said for star states that really lead the way in showing good examples. And I would say what would really be great is to have partnerships, public-private partnerships that really focus on enhancing, almost like creating a digital city, right? Using a state as an example, right, or a model state around, what's possible when you're fully digitized. And I imagine a number of players in the industry would be quite willing to participate in such an exercise to just really, look at incentives from, infrastructure deployment, software acquisition, and the number of, solutions development and, business stimulation that comes with that for the players.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Juliet. I think, just going on to the broadband plan, I know you'd mentioned 2018. I think now we're on to 2020. Okay, I think now we're on to 2020, 2025. And just, in your mind, to promote the dynamics of the Nigerian digital economy, we've seen some initiatives from the government and from the regulators. There's a target of 90% broadband, across the country penetration by 2025. Connectivity to all tertiary universities. There's 50% of connectivity to secondary schools. There's 25% to primary schools. There's, one general hospital across all the local governments. Just from your perspective, are these ambitious or achievable goals by the government and the regulators?
I think these are achievable goals. I think it's important for them to be ambitious, because really what we're talking about is stimulating the economy. If you really look at the last few years, whilst investment to other sectors have declined, investment within the tech space has gone up, right? And so when we talk about overall economic growth, you can't separate that from growth of the digital economy. And for you to have a thriving digital economy, there are certain things that have to be in place. First and foremost, you need good internet infrastructure, connectivity, right? So that people can access those solutions. If you consider the fact that the internet today has democratized access to information and created a level playing field of sorts, because now someone who has a smartphone, for example, in Aba has access to the same information as someone else at Harvard or anywhere else in the world, right? So that creates a level playing field of sorts. It's incredibly empowering. And when people have access to these tools and solutions, they're able to create opportunities for themselves. We've seen a lot of great success stories of people getting online, either by self-tutoring with how-to videos or webinars, etc., just really creating opportunities for themselves and setting up successful businesses or taking their businesses beyond borders. So, I think we should be ambitious for sure, because earlier you talked about how do we incentivize our young people to use their talents locally, etc. This is all part of the same game. It's important that we accelerate plans to be able to develop the environment and the economy and provide opportunities for Nigerians at large to be able to access the tools that are available.
Thanks, Juliet. We'll take a question from the audience. This question says, in layman terms, could you explain what role Google is playing in driving broadband coverage in country? Thank you.
I explained this before, but okay, in layman terms, I would say we've done a number of things over the years, and it continues to be an important area of focus. So, for example, one of the things we're looking at is partnering with device manufacturers, OEMs, to bring down the cost of devices. Because when you talk about access, devices are also important as a tool for getting access. We also partner with telecom operators around just looking at packages that are a lot more affordable for users, and providing co-marketing incentives to make that possible. We ran a program called the University Access Program for a few years as well, where we actually paid for broadband infrastructure for schools around the country. And as part of that as well, we provided free Google Apps for Education software to just get the faculty and students online. We did that successfully end-to-end for over 15 higher institutions in the country. And I talked about Google Station as well, that was really aimed at providing free public Wi-Fi. So these are some examples, and we continue to be involved in committees and industry forums that just really talk about or build plans around how to create the enabling environment to stimulate growth.
Thanks, Juliet. I think just on the back of your response, one of my questions is, when you partner with the universities and, you provide them with the broadband infrastructure for a certain amount of period, how are they able to maintain that going forward? How does that continue?
Yes.
What has been put in place to ensure that that actually continues and doesn't just stop when Google steps back? Thank you.
Sure. Actually, what we found is that when you give people access and they get a taste of what's possible, they usually go the extra mile to ensure that there's continuity around that. And so with a lot of these initiatives, what we do is just, open up the book to show what's possible, provide the tools, provide training, right? And what we tend to see is once people understand the benefit, once I see, for example, that I can grow my business, if I invest in internet access, I can actually put my business online and I get, 80% more customers, or grow my revenue by 200%. I'm incentivized to spend the, maybe 1% of my revenue to do that, because I see the return on investment is a lot more. So that's been the classic experience.
Thanks for that. We can't speak to the tech space without speaking to the fintechs. I know that you also touched on that where we mentioned, Flutterwave, Paystack, Kuda and the likes. But, the Nigerian fintech space has witnessed a lot of activities recently, and we've seen a sizable number of investments from notable global names. And this trend has continued into 2021, despite having some somewhat muted activities in 2020. Do you see this growth, continuing in the near future? And on the back of that, my question is that, while foreign investment has been very integral to that space, how do we also encourage more local investors, given the enormous potential in the space?
That's a great question. And yes, we've seen amazing developments in the fintech space. And I don't think we've seen the last of it. I think that's going to continue to grow, because when you just look at the sheer size of the opportunity, we still have a huge challenge around financial inclusion. And when you look at the unbanked population and just the opportunities for growth, it's really understand, and the fact that this environment is a mobile first environment, right? When you think about all those factors, it's not surprising to see how that opportunity is going to continue to exist. And at the moment, the telecoms and the fintech sector are part of the fastest growing within this environment. I would say, in addition to that, given that Nigeria is Africa's biggest technology market, accounting for 23% of internet users, with 122 million people, and this is as at 2018, these numbers. We've also seen that, we're also aware that we have the largest number of telecom subscribers. The tele density is almost 90%, right? Yet only 51% of the population has access to the internet. And so there's a huge headroom, and it really indicates the potential for investment growth in the telecom space. In fintech, specifically, online transactions hit 569 million at the end of Q3 2020. It's just two quarters ago, accounting for $116 billion of the total $203 billion for the same period. So this shows a deficit of $87 billion for just one quarter. It's also estimated that the annual online transactions in Nigeria alone can rise to 1 trillion annually by 2025. These figures just really indicate the potential for investment growth in the fintech space. And it's nowhere near saturated, I would say. And I would say as well that these areas are the best in terms of opportunities to be explored, as their services cut across multiple sectors of the economy as well. So they have applications in agriculture, in mining, energy, oil and gas, manufacturing, logistics, supply chain, education, health, and so many other sectors. So that is really an area of significant growth in the near future that we see.
Absolutely. I think, as a country, we're just scratching the surface. There's been a lot of focus on the payment space, like you mentioned. We still have agri, we have education, we have insurance, we have, health and all that. So I think, there's an enormous potential, for tech in the other sectors within the country. We'll take a question from the audience at this point. It says that with no publicly listed tech companies, how can Nigerian investors invest in the space? I know that I just asked a question on how do we encourage local investors to play in that space?
Yes, so I just realized I didn't answer that question. It is true that a lot of the investment we're seeing is coming from outside the region. But we do have some investors that are active in this environment and that are investing in local businesses. I think the advice to investors would be to watch the trends, see where the opportunities are, see the sectors that are growing and the level of activity and the success stories coming out of specific sectors. And then, of course, there's a certain level of due diligence that always has to happen. And once that's done, I would say this is one of the areas where you can have incredible returns once the basics are in place, right? There's, operational excellence and, a viable product. Scaling is almost a given. So that's something that investors should really bear in mind. At Google, we talk about the next billion users. That's an internal initiative, and that's based on the premise that currently there are over 7 billion people on the planet, and just about 50% are connected. But if you look at the global landscape, you'll find out that the next billion users coming online will largely come from emerging markets like African markets. And so this region represents the next wave of internet growth, the next wave of digital solutions. And so every investor should really be looking at this environment, because the headroom for growth is amazing.
Absolutely. I think, some of the challenges that investors have, in this space is with respect to valuation. It's not the typical valuation that you have for normally listed companies. So I think just wrapping their heads around that might be a challenge. But just in terms of potential, I think is totally enormous.
I do agree. And that's why I talked about the due diligence. Yes, there's a certain due diligence that always has to happen. We're not just going to, pretend and say, oh, it's all rosy, etc. There's a certain due diligence that needs to happen. But we are seeing that there are some sound entrepreneurs and there are some sound businesses coming out of this environment. So once you tick the box on the due diligence, it's important to embrace the opportunity and take the plunge.
Absolutely. I think my next question will be on financial inclusion. I think you had touched on that a bit in your last response. Access now in Nigeria just to the basic financial services is, considered critical, or considered a critical building block in reducing poverty and promoting economic growth in country. Currently, Nigeria's exclusion rate is at 40%, and that's one of the highest in Africa. What role do you think technology can play to bridge that gap?
Was that a gap around financial inclusion?
Yes, it was a gap around financial inclusion.
I think we've touched on this already in many ways. When we think about financial inclusion, there are a number of things at play. One is, the level of literacy. And so, capacity building is an important area. Infrastructure provision is another one, providing, connectivity and basic tools. And when I talk about connectivity, also devices, making sure that there are incentives to drive down device prices. And just an enabling policy environment for these solutions to emerge. I think, those are, in addition to what's been said already, those would be some of the enabling factors to drive a lot more financial inclusion.
Thanks for that. So we'll just take a question from the audience now. It says, hello, Juliet, nice session. Based on your many years in the world of technology, what strategy would you suggest for Africa as the fourth industrial revolution is already upon us? Africa has always lost out and ended up becoming the least player in the economies of global technology. What can we do to turn the tide and strategically place Africa as we are just starting the 4IR industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution?
That's a great question, and I totally agree with the sentiment of that question. And that's why I mentioned earlier that the fact that our plans should definitely be ambitious. They should be ambitious because right now we are in the fourth industrial revolution, which is really characterized by ubiquitous access to technology. It's really the digital revolution. And I often say that digital literacy today is to society what basic literacy was, decades ago. It's now the almost like the starting point. It should be the basic provision for everyone. And so really efforts at stimulating growth within the digital space would be really important. And there are different pillars that need to be attended to. We've talked a lot about infrastructure, so I wouldn't talk about that, but that's one pillar. The other is, capacity building, just making sure that there's a lot more digital capacity in our schools, for example, ensuring that there is infrastructure and people are taking advantage of e-learning tools and platforms, because when you also take education online, you find out that it's a lot easier to update curriculum, right? And our students can enhance the quality of their learning by getting access to the most up-to-date and the most cutting edge learning tools and modules, right? These are available online. So capacity building, that's within institutions, but even at large, looking at how we can just provide more training, more capacity building at scale, right, for the masses. Another important part is just also looking at the players that contribute to that industry, and that's where we have content developers, that's where we have programmers, that's where we have agencies and so on, and just looking at ensuring that they are equipped to be able to develop solutions that just really energize the ecosystem, solutions that provide tools that provide solutions to local problems, that provide opportunity, and just really provide and showcase local content.
Thanks, Juliet. I think just to follow up to one of the comments you had made, just with respect to e-learning, do you think, the way our youths are going to, or, going forward, looking into the future, do you think the educational system is going to change dramatically from what we have now? I know that at the height of the COVID impact, there was a lot of schooling from home, and there's still some schools that are essentially still doing some of the e-learning and some of the physical classrooms. What's in your perspective? How do you see the future for learning for our youths going forward? And also, maybe I should add a question to that, just in terms of remote working. The face of working has also dramatically changed over the past year. Do you think that remote working in large scale is here to stay, and how should organizations get ready to adapt to this new trend?
That's a great question, and you're absolutely right. So when we think about the future of work, flexible working is an important part of that. Flexible working modules. And part of that is also remote working. One of the things that we've learned from the pandemic is the fact that actually people can be very effective working remotely. We've seen an acceleration to digital transformation and preference for remote working, doing things online, reducing physical engagement and so on. And even after the pandemic, even though, yes, some things may return to some semblance of normal, some of these habits, I believe would persist. And they should persist, because there's a lot of efficiency to be gained when you think about these flexible working schemes or even remote working. So for example, imagine the amount of time spent commuting in a city like Lagos. We've really actually dramatically cut down, commute time by being able to work remotely. And it's an opportunity for organizations to just really, have another look at their businesses and say, do people actually need to show up every day, 9 to 5 or whatever hours? Some people stay till much later to avoid traffic. Do we even need to have permanent desks? Maybe we don't have to expand or perhaps we're planning to expand the office. Now that we have to be a lot more cost conscious and think about more cost effectiveness, maybe we don't have to expand the office, or maybe we can even, we don't need this much space. Perhaps rather than having fixed desks, maybe we can have hot desks so that, people come in and you just, you take a desk that is available, right? These are things we need to start thinking about, questioning the traditional models and looking at, what are the advantages? Of course, it's not a one size fits all. There are some organizations that still need to, operate in large parts to some degree, the traditional way, right? But every organization should take an objective and a hard look to just see, how can I pivot to reap the benefits that this period is offering, right? So that's in terms of remote working. In terms of learning, the benefits of e-learning are abundant, and beyond education, even within the corporate space, it's important for organizations to start looking more at learning management systems, right? Because in the past, when we think about staff development, there's a lot of, sending your staff out to training, attending a course somewhere and all that, right? But we may not have the luxury of being able to do that at the same rate, especially when we're thinking about safety. But there are lots of great learning management systems that are very engaging. Can we start to leverage these, at least for some of the basic training modules that we just need staff to have at their fingertips? And then more broadly with education, definitely, I think, it's really opening, e-learning really opens up the space to empower people, because you can learn at your own pace, at your own time, and you can be selective about, what content, what level of content is relevant for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Juliet. Thanks for that. And I think a follow-on question to that would be security, and cybersecurity at that. With greater reliance on technology, comes greater exposures to the threat of cybersecurity. Yeah. How can we ensure that we stay secure, particularly in a nation with a large number of digital migrants? I think the other day I was reading a report that says that the government loses over, was it 75 billion to cyber or data, some sort of fraud online and all that. So how do we ensure that we stay secure with where we are as a nation, saying that everything is going digital? How do we secure ourselves?
Sure. I think cybersecurity is definitely very important. And it's also good to recognize some of the positives in the space. I must commend Nigeria's steps towards cybersecurity. I would say that the first major step is really to just acknowledge that this is, it is a risk. And in December 2014, we published, when I say we, I mean Nigeria, published a national cybersecurity strategy, which clearly mapped out Nigeria's national cybersecurity vision and the strategies for achieving this vision. Also, in May 2015, we signed into law the Nigeria Cybercrime, which has provision, prevention, etc. The Nigeria Cybercrime Act. Just 2 years ago, in 2018, the CBN developed the risk-based cybersecurity framework and guidelines for financial institutions to protect them from cyber attack. So, these are all very important in the cybersecurity drive, excuse me, and implementing the guidelines across board, can be challenging sometimes. I would say as well that with the growing volume and sophistication that we see around the world around cyber attacks, cybersecurity is a necessary consideration for individuals, for businesses, and for governments. And so all hands must be on deck, I would say, to effectively combat, the challenges, because by their very nature, they require a loophole or entry point through which the attack can be replicated. And so it's really important that, every player is vigilant. And I would say as well that this is something that needs to just be reviewed on a continuous basis as new programs and cyber intruders develop and exploit new vulnerabilities in computer programs and systems. It's important that there's continuous education, review, etc., to just make sure that there's awareness around combating some of these challenges. But by and large, I think it's good to see a lot of the steps that are being taken. It's good to see the level of focus and importance that has been given to the issue. And I think they're just basic practices that can ensure and guarantee safety of data and systems.
Thanks, Juliet. And as we'll wind down, I think just one or two final questions from my end. Just looking at the themes and outlook for the sector, what are some of those themes you see emerging within the sector in the next 3 to 5 years? And what is your outlook for the sector in the medium to short term?
Opportunities in the sector, in the space. I would say the tech sector in Nigeria is positioned for growth in the coming years, even post the pandemic. The pandemic has just really accelerated the move to digital transformation, but the opportunities actually speak for themselves. And I would say as well that the circumstances created by the crisis have accelerated digitization and fintech services. So some of the themes that are emerging are in the near term, in the mid to near term, I would say one is just really around fintech, which we've talked about, but I would say even the fintech solutions are likely to move beyond core payment. Fintech infrastructure is likely more and more to provide non-core financial services in other industries such as energy, insurance, education, healthcare, and so on. So there's likely to be a push for the adoption of mobile money services to financial healthcare, education, asset acquisition, and other basic consumer needs. Another area of interest to watch out is insurance. I think it remains an untapped opportunity for fintech in Nigeria, and we're likely to see a trend of tech being deployed to enhance customer education on insurance products, increase in speed, and just other features that are really important for the insurance value chain. The SME segment, I think, is one that has been relatively underserved. And according to a McKinsey report, SME payments really account for 28% of growth over the last 3 years. They've grown by that amount. And in spite of that, there has been little activity in certain specific service areas within the SME space, like SME insurance, lending, savings, and investment. So this is also an area that we want to watch out for, because this is a huge space, a huge segment, and an engine of the economy. We have depending on what data source you look at, we have anywhere from 17 to, some sources will tell you, 40 small, medium businesses in Nigeria, but at least, over 17 million. That's a huge number, and that's a huge opportunity space in terms of just providing solutions to digitize operations and to facilitate transactions. These are some of the areas that I think, and then I think also another area to note is just the emergence of solutions around technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning. Already we're seeing a lot of machine learning solutions in this environment. For example, in agriculture, in some parts of Africa, we're seeing machine learning being used in cassava farms to automatically detect and prevent diseases with cassava crops. And these are, the front end for these solutions are essentially just basic phones that can be used by subsistence farmers, right? So of course you have a very sophisticated algorithm powering it, but this particular example I'm talking about, a farmer has a smartphone, loads the application, takes a picture of the leaf, and the machine learning algorithm is able to figure out what the disease is, and have access to databases that would also surface the recommended solution. That's an example. We're seeing this also in healthcare, a number of innovative solutions, and by tech startups as well, right? So I think we'll see a lot of the tech-based solutions leveraging some of these sophisticated technologies to just accelerate solution provision in different sectors.
Absolutely. And just being conscious of time, I think this will be the final question that we'll take from the audience. It says that, would Google ever consider a more comprehensive strategic partnership with a telco in Nigeria, given their touch points with the unbanked customers?
So we actually see the the telecom industry as a very important strategic partner for Google, because if we're talking about connectivity, the internet, etc., well, they provide the gateway, right? So in around the world, we actually we place a premium on win-win holistic strategic relationships with telcos.
Thanks, Juliet. I think that brings us to the end of the session. Very insightful, very informative. I've learned a lot today. So, thank you so much, Juliet, for taking out time to chat with us. At this point, I'll hand over. I'd also thank you to, our clients and investors that have dialed in to listen to the sessions over the past couple of days. At this point in time, I'll hand over to Titi Ogunbeson, who is the CEO of Stanbic IBTC Stockbroking, to give the closing remark. Juliet, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, and we'll connect. We'll connect, in the near future. Thank you so much. Titi, over to you.
Thanks, Balaji.
Yes, and I totally agree with you. It's been very insightful. So on behalf of the entire team at Stanbic IBTC, would like to say a big thank you for honoring our invitation to present at this webinar. The time we have spent with you this evening has not only been insightful, but it's also been very refreshing and engaging. I must say that, it's on this worthy note that we're closing the 3-day webinar that started on the 23rd and ran through today. We have no doubt that the participants have been enriched with in a remarkable manner. And once again, would like to say a big thank you to you, and we look forward to having you back with us at future events. Thank you very much, and have a great evening.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure.